Hello and welcome another episode of Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Todd, you said I was going to love Husky Stadium. You
Yeah.
were correct, and you wore the purple just to signify it.
Yeah, it was that was a great environment, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it had been a few years since I had been there, but it was everything I remembered it. I mean, the scenics were about as good as you can get. It was a beautiful night as the sun was setting, or boats on the water, and great crowd, a lot of energy in the stadium, loud. And when the home team wins, it makes it even more of an
Helps.
exciting environment. So yeah, it was everything we could have hoped for.
Yeah, I think there's the classic meme format of tired versus wired. I think tired is tailgating and wired is sailgating. I'm all in
Yeah.
on the sailgating life. I
Yeah.
don't want it if it's not a nice sailgate. But yeah, really fun. We got another West Coast trip, which we're going to hit later in the pod. But let's get started on first down and start with just the overall chaos of this past Saturday, and that's really what it was. We can begin with our game. And you mentioned it was a great environment, but it was also a great win for Jed Fish and this Washington program over Michigan.
Yeah, it really was. And we had talked about this, leading into the game. We talked about it on the air, that this is a team that very easily could have been 5-0 going into the game. I mean, they had done some really good things on both sides of the ball. They had, good schemes, good players, but they were their own worst enemy in the two games that they lost, between penalties and lack of execution in the red zone or third down. And they really, hurt themselves. So they learned from that. They grew from it. And, as Jed Fish told Catherine Tappan before the game, my message to the team was, let's just play Michigan today. Let's not play ourselves also. And they didn't. They were better in all those phases. And, they continued to get good play out of Will Rogers and timely play out of their defense, forcing a couple turnovers in the fourth quarter. And it was a big win. But they did all those other little things, the game within the game, third down, red zone penalties that they had not done in two losses. They did them much better and came away with a big win.
Does sound like Jack Tuttle is going to start for Michigan this week, so maybe a changing of the guard with the Wolverines. But credit to Washington for the composure they showed with Michigan going quarterback change, coming back, going ahead. Washington stayed there, and they got the job done late.
Yeah, they did. And I think for the most part, even though the stat says 179 yards rushing for Michigan, which is a good amount, I thought Washington still defended the run well enough to put themselves in a position to win. Again, when they played in the championship game last January, Michigan ran for over 300 yards. And when you do that, it's a helpless feeling for a defense. So
Breaks
I
their
think that,
spirit.
yeah, so I think Washington did enough stopping the run to force Michigan to play third down. And because of that, they were able to create the two turnovers. I mean, I do think that Jack Tuttle gave them a spark. I thought that he clearly looks to be the best way forward for Michigan. But he had two very costly turnovers. And not only did they come in the fourth quarter, but it led directly to points. Washington capitalized on both turnovers for 10 points, and that was the difference in the game.
Will be interesting to watch how that develops moving forward. That was the first field storm in the
Yeah.
Big Ten. Right after that game ended, so did Minnesota and USC. And the Gophers with a nice win. We were talking about how they were a lot better than what their record probably
Yeah.
showed. And Max Brosmer was a lot better than maybe what people anticipated. And they really showed that a complete game on both sides of the field to beat the number 11 team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, they were the more physical team. I mean, they were the more complete team. They won at the line of scrimmage. They limited Minnesota or USC's offense, which we've seen can be really dangerous and explosive. They kind of held Miller Moss in check, picked him off a couple times. And I said last week that I thought that this Minnesota had a really good chance of winning this game if they carried that momentum for how they played in the second half against Michigan into this game. And obviously they did. They knew they had a chance to win that game in Ann Arbor. They came up short, but they played to their capabilities and played for four quarters and a huge win for PJ Fleck. And Max Brosmer, he didn't throw for a ton of yards. It looks like they had better balance. They weren't just counting on throwing it all over the place. Darius Taylor had over 140 yards rushing. Brosmer had a bunch of touchdown runs, short runs. And The last one was a quarterback sneak on 4th and goal with 55 seconds left. So a thrilling win for Minnesota.
Really awesome scenes over there. And I mean, awesome scenes across college football, not just in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Arguably the best one being in Nashville, and what we saw, especially after the game, after Vanderbilt took down #1 Alabama, the dichotomy of 2 weeks where Alabama comes away with this massive win over Georgia and then loses to Vanderbilt 40-35. And the goalpost is just going down. Nashville dumped in the water. I mean, that was college football personified.
Yeah, and I think college football has found a new cult hero also in Diego Pavia. I mean, he's unbelievable, right? Guy transferred, I think, from New Mexico State. I think that's where he came from. But he's played well all year for Vanderbilt. I mean, the thing about this game is, Vanderbilt's had a good season. They've had a couple good wins already. I'm not saying that Alabama shouldn't have, they should have won the game, right? They're a better team, but they scored 40 points on Alabama. They moved the ball. They pushed them around. I mean, this was not some fluky win that Vanderbilt orchestrated. I mean, they won the game in very impressive fashion. So hats off to them, and I mean, it was a chaotic weekend in the SEC, right? I mean, you got those guys losing. Tennessee, who a lot of people think coming into last week may have been actually the best team in the SEC. They go to Fayetteville and lose to the Razorbacks there in a low-scoring game. And so really, really crazy weekend all across college football, but particularly at the top of the SEC.
Final score of that game, Arkansas 19, Tennessee 14. So the Vols fall to number 8 in the poll. Alabama's down at number 7 in the poll. And that allows for a couple Big Ten teams to jump up into the top 4 in the polls, brings us to second down. There's 3 teams in the Big Ten now in the top 4 of the country right now, according to the AP poll. Ohio State went from number 3 to number 2 after a convincing win against Iowa. You've got Oregon now up at number 3 from number 6. And you've got Penn State going from 7 to 4 after a 27-11 win over UCLA. All 3 teams undefeated. All 3 teams playing some really good football, arguably their best football right now. And obviously those first 2 are facing off this week, but it feels like now the Big Ten and this new iteration of the Big Ten is starting to build some momentum.
Yeah, I think so. And we haven't even thrown in there one of the other undefeated teams in the Big Ten, which is Indiana, who's playing great football right now and ranked. And so a lot of energy and excitement out of there. You got a Nebraska team that's got 1 loss with a big win this past weekend. So, yeah, I mean, the Big Ten is at least here through the first month and a half of the season, really showing their strength. And so our matchup, 2 versus 3 is going to be outstanding. And it should be a really fun game, a great matchup. Penn State, the only concern I have for them, and a lot of it hinges on the health of Nick Singleton, because this is a team that has got a lot of good pieces, but he is a very special piece to their offense. And watching that game, they just didn't look the same running the football. Now, I don't want to take anything away from UCLA's ability to play some defense, but Penn State only ran for 85 yards on 30 carries. That was under 3 yards per carry. Singleton is kind of that more explosive back. Katron Allen is a really good back, but Singleton is the home run hitter. And so, they missed him, and it'll be interesting to see if he's full go this week and ready to come back at it as they travel out to play USC.
Let's just give Indiana, I know you mentioned them, a little bit more shine. 6-0, averaging 47.5 points and 515 yards in Kurt Cignetti's offense through the first 6 games. I mean, they've probably been, outside of Vanderbilt, obviously what they did last week, outside of a couple other teams, they've been one of the best stories in all of college football this year. And a lot of credit goes to Coach Sig. Just Google him. That's it. Just Google him.
Well, and Curtis Rourke too, right? I mean,
100%.
The grad transfer, and again, this is the face or the picture of college football in today's world. In our game, we're going to see 2 guys who transferred, older guys who came from other programs, have played a lot of football, and they're leading their teams. Same thing with Indiana. Curtis Rourke played a lot of ball at Ohio University. Now he comes over here. He's played great, 380 yards passing in the game on Saturday. And, they've got a lot of good players. Now they've got harder tests down the road for sure. But they've beaten everybody on their schedule, and they've beaten them pretty convincingly. That's the thing. It's not, they're not winning games 14-13 or 10-3. I mean, they're scoring a bunch of points. You expect to see Ohio State like leading the Big Ten in total offense and scoring and all that, and they're number 2 behind Indiana right now. So pretty great season they've got going on in Bloomington.
You mentioned Nebraska, also a convincing win for Wisconsin over Purdue, which was really a great sign for them. Now with Braden Locke starting, got offense rolling, and look, Purdue hasn't played well this year, but it's still a defensive scheme that's tricky to deal with. And Wisconsin went out there, got the job done. Nebraska was a different type of win, grinded out over Rutgers. First loss of the season for the Scarlet Knights, 14-7. So for both teams now with second-year head coaches, it feels like we're seeing that identity kind of show itself from a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, I think looking at Wisconsin, first of all, I'm really happy for Braden Locke, because for the second year in a row, he's had to kind of come off the bench and become the starter. His first time out was difficult, but he's kind of settled in now, and he threw for 359 yards and 3 touchdowns. So good for him. Nebraska, this is the first game, I think, where Dylan Raiola kind of looked like a freshman and had some struggles and didn't have the same kind of game he's had. But that Nebraska defense has been legit all year. We knew that coming in, that this team would be built and be, kind of focused around their defense. And, they held Rutgers to 2 of 14 on third down, 2 of 6 on fourth down. Only, neither team offensively had over 265 yards of total offense, but Nebraska's defense kind of, they held them completely in check. Kyle Monangai, who I think is an outstanding back, one of the best in the league, was held to 78 yards on 19 carries. So Nebraska won this one in a slugfest because of the strength of their defense.
Move to third down in our game previews for week 7. Let's start with our game. And there's going to be a lot to preview, and we'll get deeper into it. But number 2 versus number 3, Ohio State goes to Eugene, takes on Oregon, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on NBC and Peacock. There's so much to get through with this game. There are so many connections within this game. But at the end of the day, this is the battle right now, it feels like, for the top of the Big Ten and arguably for the top of the college football world about midway through the year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think everybody, still kind of recognizes that Ohio State is the team to beat in the league. There are no weaknesses on this team. And when you look across the board, offense and defense, the talent level, position by position, each level of their defense, everywhere in their offense. The only question marks coming in for Ohio State to begin the year was offensive line and quarterback. All right. Well, the offensive line has played really, really well. They've really gelled. They've done a great job. Chip Kelly as a play caller has just had a nice blend of run and pass. And then Will Howard, the transfer from Kansas State, has played exceptionally well. He's a running threat as well as a passing threat, and that really shows up in the red zone more than anywhere else. They're just very, very difficult to defend. The receivers, the running backs, outstanding. And then defensively, this is the third year in Jim Knowles' system, and you can just tell. I mean, they are just playing at a different level defensively because everybody's playing fast and everybody has great knowledge of what the system is. So they're playing great. This will be a challenge for them, though. They have not yet really. I mean, Iowa is a physical team, a tough team. They're typically hard to run on and get big plays on, but they're still very one-dimensional when it comes to playing offense. And Ohio State was able to just kind of stifle them. It was a slow start, right? Ohio State didn't look great early offensively. Their defense held them right in there. But you could tell Iowa was never going to figure out Ohio State's defense. So it was just a matter of time before the Buckeyes offense kicked into gear. And you see the explosive nature. I mean, 21 points, boom, 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 like that in the third quarter. That they have that ability. So and turnovers, kind of help that as well. Oregon is a more balanced offensive football team, so it'll be a better test, for this Ohio State defense. Oregon, first 2 games didn't look like everybody expected them to look. Didn't look like a power in the Big Ten. Had a kind of a ho-hum win against Idaho. Then they had a nail-biting win against Boise State, who is really a pretty good football team. But the last 3 weeks now, they have played in more dominant fashion, and they've won all three in very convincing way. I think they should be very confident. Their defense looks to be legit. So I think on both sides of the ball, this will be the biggest test that Ohio State has faced, plus the crowd. You know, I mean, Autzen Stadium is not as big as the Big House or the Horseshoe or Penn State, but I don't know if there are any places any louder than Autzen Stadium when it's cranked up, and it will be cranked up on Saturday night. So that home field advantage, I think, will play for something for Oregon in this game.
Now, just to put a button on that first part of the Oregon conversation, that Boise State win looks better and better each week. I mean, Ashton Jeanty, through the first 6 weeks of the season, you could argue is the Heisman Trophy winner in the midway point of the year, along with the Travis Hunter. There's no real runaway winner, but Jeanty is on pace to break Barry Sanders' Heisman season numbers. Right. I mean, that's how dominant he's been. So they look like a team that could easily be vying for that playoff spot as a group of five school. So, yeah, it was a nail-biting win. It was a one-score win, but it was a win against a very good football team, and they're undefeated, obviously, coming in. And to your point, the last couple of weeks, they've looked more like the team we expected them to look like. We're excited. Again, we'll have a little bit deeper dive into this game. The other game that's interesting in the Big Ten this week, and it's a little different now after USC lost last week, but Penn State has to go to SC, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. It's a long road trip for Penn State, the time zone difference, and we've also seen the challenges for all of these schools that have been changing time zones. In fact, the only school that has won when having to change multiple time zones in the Big Ten this year is Indiana, going to UCLA week 3 in the game that we were at. Other than that, everybody else has lost. And so I'm curious to see what the number 4 team in the country does. I'm curious to see what USC looks like after the loss last week as well.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, this is a great opportunity to see what kind of bounce back USC has. You know, what kind of mental toughness they have to come back from a disappointing loss on the road and now try to defend their home turf. You know, for Penn State, here's what I'll say. Again, I mentioned Nick Singleton. I think he's a big factor for them offensively going forward, and his health is you know, a big deal. But they say this in basketball, and you can say it in football too. Defense travels. Okay, defense travels, and Penn State's defense is playing really well right now. The last few weeks has been their best football. You know, Tom Allen, the new defensive coordinator, it seems like they are in sync right now, and so that they'll take that to USC. That, you know, that defense will travel. And here's the other thing: coming off of a loss for USC and now a couple losses on the season, the Coliseum's a beautiful place, all right, but it will not be a raucous environment, hard for Penn State to go in there and play. It won't be anything like the whiteout or what we saw at Penn State when Illinois came into play. It won't be anything like we saw in Seattle on Saturday or what we'll see this week in Eugene. So the crowd aspect will not really be something Penn State has to deal with, I don't think. But the time change and the long trip and all of that, you know, I think USC, the onus is really on them. I think Penn State is playing at a pretty high level right now. I'm very confident in what they can do on both sides of the ball. And the big question will be, how does USC respond and how do they show up in this ball game?
Fascinating point in both of their seasons for Penn State, now into the top 4 and undefeated. For USC, a loss would get them to 3-3 after that week 1 had people believing, oh wait, this team could be different, could be a legit contender, a legit threat over the course of this season as we go to 4th down. And we play the name game now. So I'm going to ask you to name an impact player from each team in Big Ten games that could be a difference maker this week. And let's start with Washington at Iowa. We saw Washington last week. We know what they're capable of on both sides of the ball. And we had Iowa a couple weeks back, and we know certainly what they're capable of defensively and in the run game. So you look at this matchup and who makes the impact on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I think for Washington, you know, again, the challenge is going to be Iowa is a run-first team. I mean, that's what they want to do. So I think those two inside linebackers, Carson Bruner and Alfonso Tupatala, I mean, they are the key guys for this Washington defense. I think those are the guys that will have to make the impact as they deal with the Iowa run game. And for Iowa on the other side, it's Caleb Johnson. I mean, he was one of the leading rushers in college football coming into the game last week against Ohio State. They kind of handled him. He had a late touchdown run. He ended up with 86 yards, but really when the game was still in question in the first half, very, very little running room for him. So he's got to get cranked up again. And Iowa will go as their running game goes. So I think that's the impact matchup there.
Should be a very interesting game overall, as will Wisconsin going to Piscataway, because we just talked about Wisconsin and Braden Locke having the big game last week, big numbers against Purdue. Rutgers coming off its first loss of the season in what was a rock fight. So you look at this matchup and who stands out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now. I think Braden Locke still has to play well, right? Because Rutgers is going to be a solid defensive football team. This new back they've got, Tawi, is that how we say it?
Yeah.
Tawi Walker.
Tawi Walker.
Yeah, I think he becomes a feature guy. 3 touchdowns in the win against Purdue. And I still think for Rutgers, their impact guy has got to be Kyle Monangai. I really think he's their go-to guy. He's their feature guy. Everything kind of flows off of their ability to run the football. So, I think that's where they got to kind of get their footing back this week.
Yeah, it does feel like whoever runs the ball a little bit more effectively will probably come away with a win. And another one of those turning points for both teams within their season. If Wisconsin can find a win, they put themselves on a fast track the rest of the year. If Rutgers gets back in the win column, I mean, you've mentioned that's a team that could easily find their 10-win season this year, just with the way their schedule is laid out after the tough loss last week. Last one we'll check in on, Purdue at number 23 Illinois following their bye week. They get back to it at home, still ranked in the top 25, despite the loss a couple weeks ago at Penn State. Who are you looking for in this matchup?
Yeah, I think for Purdue, it's Devin Maccabee, their running back. I think, Purdue has just been so bad offensively, and they fired their offensive coordinator, leading into last week. Hudson Card, it just has not materialized. He just has not played at the level they thought that he would play and hoped that he would play. So I think Purdue's best hope is that they can run the football, shorten the game. I mean, that's the way Illinois likes to play anyway. They want to run the football and limit possessions, but that's the best formula for Purdue to stay in this one. And then on the other side, I think Luke Altmaier needs to, he's got to get back on the horse. And he had, a couple of turnovers in the Penn State game. But he had a great season going into that. He had not thrown an interception until that game. Now they've had some time to kind of regroup. They still got a really good football team. And so he's got to come back out and reassert himself as the leader of that team.
Yeah, it's a great team. They're incredibly well coached. I would fully expect them to get right back to their winning ways after the bye week. As we take a look at our Xfinity big connections, and there's a lot for our game as mentioned. Let's go with the obvious one, and that is going to be Chip Kelly, who was with Oregon, led Oregon to a national title appearance as their head coach. Had built himself up from offensive coordinator through head coach, then makes the bolt for the NFL with the Philadelphia Eagles, then the 1 year with San Francisco, and comes back around to the college world at UCLA over the last several seasons. It's rare to see a coach go in college from one school to another when they're going from head coach to offensive coordinator, but they didn't get fired in the previous spot.
Right.
Like, that is incredibly rare, and that's what Chip Kelly did. But just go through some of the accolades. It was with Oregon from 2009 to 2012, OC for a couple of years before that. 2010, they finished the regular season 12-0, number 2 overall, lost to Cam Newton in that Auburn Tigers team in the national championship game, a tightly contested game, 22-19. He was the AP Coach of the Year in 2010. He had a 46-7 record in 4 seasons at Oregon. As mentioned, then his next steps. But currently the OC and quarterback coach at Ohio State, and reunited with Ryan Day, who actually was with him in the NFL as well. So interesting, because obviously he's going back to Eugene, a place that I think he still is looked at quite fondly for helping put that Oregon program on the map to the level they are right now as well. And excited to see what that Ohio State offense can do against an Oregon defense that's played pretty well, especially the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating story, and you mentioned his career numbers at Oregon. I mean, those numbers are very, very similar. Maybe not quite as good, but very similar to Ryan Day's numbers at Ohio State as a head coach, right? And the other thing about what he did at Oregon, not just win. I mean, he brought a lot of innovation to college football during his time there. In terms of teams playing fast, going with no huddle. Really trying to put pressure on the defense that way. Just speed, the amount of speed that they put on the field offensively, and the speed of their operation. He did a lot of other things. We see a lot of teams now that Thursday they do a walkthrough or a no sweat Thursday, and they speed up a little practice on Friday. Chip was the first guy to ever do that. Traditionally people practiced on Thursday, a normal practice. They did their walkthrough on Friday, played on Saturday. But Chip had done some research that somehow you could speed your body up better to be ready to be at your peak on Saturday if you played that way or practiced that way on Friday. So a lot of innovative things he brought to the game, as well as winning football games. And so I'm sure the facilities have gotten even better from when he was there, and I'm sure he'll be impressed with that. But it'll be an interesting homecoming for sure.
He didn't just revolutionize the college football world. He revolutionized other sports. Eric Spoelstra, the head coach of the Miami Heat, after they lost in the NBA Finals in 2011, said, we need to find a way to get better. He went and visited Chip and went to one of his practices in Oregon and came back and said, let's adopt our spread offense in the NBA. And that's when Chris Bosh became a perimeter player as opposed to being an interior guy. And they win the NBA championship the next 2 seasons. So it is fascinating to see his impact across the world of sports. And it'll be interesting to see him going back to the Pacific Northwest this week. All right, let's check in.
The other thing about him right now, which I'm sure he's thrilled about, is he had really good players at Oregon. There's no question, but he has more of them at Ohio State. I think he has a better offensive line than maybe he had there. And then all the way across the board from a skill position standpoint, receivers, tight end, 2 high-level running backs. I mean, he had great skill people as well, but there's more depth and more of them at his disposal right now as a play caller for Ohio State.
No question about that. It is NFL talent littered across the field as we make our way to our Xfinity third chair. Welcome to Xfinity third chair. It's time for some fan-submitted questions presented by Xfinity, and we're joined by Colt McCoy. Colt, we appreciate you for hopping on with us, man.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thanks for letting me be on the show today.
I wouldn't say it's an honor until we finish. I would wait for that one, but we appreciate you coming on either way. I guess we'll start with this question, and Colt, will start with you on it. How do you possibly slow down Ohio State's offense?
Oh, man, I had the pleasure of calling their game against Michigan State a couple weeks ago, and you watch the team. You break them down, you look at them, and you're just like, okay, it starts with the running backs, right? Those 2 guys are both, the best 1-2 punch in college football, in my opinion. And then you get Donovan Jackson back, and you have this offensive line that's like pretty gelled. And then you start looking at their run game, and it's Chip Kelly, and it's every scheme you can think of. It's inside zone, outside zone. There's pulling schemes, guard and tackles pulling. Then you got the toss cracks, and you run toss to the boundary, toss to the field, and then you throw a reverse to Jeremiah Smith on top of that when the defense all full. I mean, there's just so many things they can do in the run game. And one of the cool things that I remember talking to Chip and to Will Howard about is you guys might ask them. It's called cognitive learning, CLC, cognitive learning communication. So basically, Chip, it's like, hey, after he calls the play in his helmet, it's like, hey, okay, free safety down weak, let's run it strong. Or, hey, this is a 1-high, 2-high read. Like, there's little things that they do in their communication in the headset that I think is really valuable for a veteran quarterback like Will Howard. You can put that on his plate, and he's really the manager and getting them into the right runs. We might take it to the shade instead of the 3 technique here, right? Like these little code words that he and Chip have together, that I think he's a very efficient manager of the game. And I think he's getting better in the pass game. That's coming along, but just what they're able to do in the run game against different looks with Chip Kelly in that system. I mean, it's proven. They did it in the NFL. They've done it in college for years, and I think they have the skill and the offensive line to do that. And man, I think that's really hard to stop.
Yeah. I mean, that's great stuff. It's funny you say that about the communication, because I've talked to a few quarterbacks this year that they have this attitude, like after a certain point, they just want the coach to stop talking. It's like, just let me go play now. Just don't give me too much. But a guy who can handle that, there's some really valuable nuggets you can get right before you get ready to snap the ball. So that's very interesting. And
yeah, I remember what he said. It's CLC, cognitive linguistic coding. I was like, okay. you got to explain that.
Sounds like a terrible college course.
Yeah, right. But I think you're right. I think it's just little tips and reminders at the end that the headset gives them flexibility to do. And one of the things Ryan Day told us was, tell me about Will Howard. He said, well, he's mature, right? Meaning he's played a lot, he's seen a lot. Played in Kansas State forever, right? Those things, he can get you into the right plays and looks because he's a veteran guy. And I just really think it's been really good for them offensively.
Yeah. I mean, an answer to the simple answer to the question, how do you stop them? I don't think you do. I really, unless they stop themselves, unless they turn the ball over, I don't know that you stop them, because their O-line is playing really well right now. And as Colt said, you got a great play caller who's going to scheme you up. You got skill all across the field. And they're super efficient in the red zone. So unless they turn the ball over, you're not going to stop them. I think the only way to beat them is you're going to have to outscore them. I mean, that's just the plain and simple way it is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Will Howard has had, he's been good for 1 pick a game, it seems like, right? So eliminate those. And then, we talked about Quinshaw Judkins, Travion Henderson, their offensive line, but they still have 2 of the best receivers in college football too.
Right.
Maybe, the first or second best receiver as a freshman. I mean, Jeremiah Smith's unbelievable. Emeka Ibuka's great. Like they're all around good, and they're going to be hard to stop.
Yeah, that is for sure. So the question, I guess, lends itself to the second one here that was submitted. Todd, we'll start with you. Will the winner of this game, Ohio State and Oregon, finish the year undefeated?
So I think that in the case of Ohio State, I would say yes. I think Oregon, I'm not as 100% sold on that. And really, look, last week should be perfect evidence that going undefeated is really hard. College football is crazy, right? You're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids for the most part. Got a lot of old quarterbacks playing in college football, right? Older guys. But for the most part, you're still dealing with college-age kids. And so you don't know. Going undefeated is really hard. But Ohio State, from a talent standpoint, I think they're the most talented team in college football right now. So I think that they have the best shot. They still have to go to Penn State later in the year and play, which will be a really tough test. But I would give them the best shot at it coming out of this game.
Colt, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the richest roster in college football, right?
Right.
I do. I think Oregon will be a good test for them. I just it's hard for me to see them slipping up. I mean, you talk to them and there's a confidence about them and an urgency about them that is, it's essentially natty or bust. That's what they've said over and over and over. And I think that's their mindset, and I don't think they've really been tested a lot. I think they'll get tested this week. You kind of see what that looks like for them. Defensively, I think they're obviously their roster's extremely talented and great players across the board. But I do think there's still some holes in their defense, and I think teams have been able to move the ball. They haven't been able to score much. When we called the Michigan State game a couple weeks ago, that first half, Michigan State really moved it up and down the field. They just turned the ball over and had some bad breaks as they got closer to the end zone that kept them out. And then the second half, they got blown away. So it'll be a fun game to watch this weekend up at Oregon. But I if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would think that Ohio State has a pretty good path to kind of find themselves right where they want to be when this regular season's over.
The Michigan State games for both these teams the last 2 weeks have felt eerily similar in how they were layered, and Michigan State moving the ball, the turnovers in the red zone, and then the second half dominance from both of the teams. We appreciate you guys for coming along on this Xfinity third chair. We remember you can submit your own questions every week to our show using the hashtag Big Talk as we get set for this top 3 showdown. All right, Colt, thanks so much for joining us this week. Before we get out of here, we got to check in. The Knights Guard, give us our update. What do we got?
Well, we had, last week we had 2 games and we won. We have a huge game this week. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there because I'm going to Columbus on Wednesday to watch the Buckeyes practice and get with their people. But we have a big game against Cannon on Wednesday. We've won 4 games in a row, so our team's playing very well. But Cannon may have the best player in the league that we will face. He is a big physical runner, plays quarterback, likes to try to punish people. And so if you would have loved to just hear all week, both Luke Kuechly, our defensive coordinator, and Greg Olson, our head coach, just trying to fire our guys up about how we have to hit this guy and hit him. And even if he runs over, the next play we have to get up and continue to hit him. And as long as he's standing, we need to hit him, tag him, hit him in the ear hole, hit him over, and maybe he will stop running hard by the time the game's over. So it'll be a fun game. Unfortunately, I'll miss it, but I feel pretty good about how our team will play.
Dude, I was about to say, how are the Olsons possibly going to stay away from each other without your presence to just calm everybody down there?
Well, Luke and Jonathan Stewart are going to they'll have to handle that while I'm gone. So
Tremendous. We appreciate everybody for joining us this week on Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to download and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel, wherever you get your audio podcasts. We've got a fantastic week across college football this week, so enjoy the games, and we'll talk to you next week.